I rented out my guest room in my South Beach condo on Airbnb for 6 months before I got shut down. And in today's video, I want to share what happened, my experience hosting, and the lessons that I learned so that you don't make the same mistakes. Welcome back to the channel, and if it's your first time here, my name is Joe. I'm a real estate advisor with Compass, and if we spoke before about Airbnb, then you probably might know this story, but today I'm going to talk to you about my decision to rent out my guest room on Airbnb, the process of listing, what it was like hosting for 6 months, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to share with you how my landlord found out and what I learned after I finally got caught by the HOA. So first, let's talk about my decision to rent out the apartment. In 2015, I was living on Collins Ave at the Georgian. It is right next to the Lowe's Hotel. It's a cute 10-story building right on the beach, and my roommate at the time had to move to New York for a job and he had to break the lease. And I didn't want to find a new roommate at the time. I decided to rent out the second bedroom on Airbnb. This is back in 2015 when Airbnb was still a relatively new platform and people were still trying to figure out the legalities and the regulations of hosting guests. So about a year prior, I stayed in San Francisco at this guy's second bedroom. His name was Evan. He was a super nice guy. He also worked in tech, and I thought that this was just a really cool platform. I saw what he was doing. He had I think it was a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. He told me a similar story with his roommate that moved out, and he was into experience because he was at like a tech startup that was doing, I think, food delivery, and I was at Apple, and I knew everything about experience, providing Ritz-Carlton service. So I knew that I could provide an experience and hopefully pay my rent doing it. I knew at some point somebody would find out, but I really just wanted to try it out and see if I could get away with it and basically have some new friends come stay at my place. That's how I was gonna sell it to the condo if they found out. Let's talk about the process of renting on Airbnb. So my first step was essentially just getting a bed. My living room was already furnished, but my roommate took everything out of the second bedroom. So I looked online, I got a box spring off Craigslist, and then I did a mattress in the box off Amazon. I also got the bed sheets off Amazon, pillows from Home Goods, and at the time there were no YouTube videos and there were barely any blog posts where hosts would share their experience. So if you wanted to know what other hosts were doing, I remember I had to go into like the Facebook groups, I had to go on like weird home sharing forums, and I would just read and read and read what everybody said. I learned so much. I did so much research before even listing it or buying all this stuff. So I saw what people said, and my goal at the end of the day was I just wanted to keep it simple and basic. I didn't want to promise a bunch of amenities for guests. I didn't want to promise that I would cook them breakfast and everything. I just wanted to keep it simple and basic, just furnish the room, simple bed, no TV in the bedroom. I really wanted to market the location and encourage people to use the private beach access. I saw those two things as better than any little trinkets or amenities that I could provide in the room itself. So after I furnished the bedroom, I scheduled photos and I had a photographer come out. Through Airbnb, they have a free photography service. The photographer came out, took photos of the entire space, the building, the beach access, and then within a couple of days, they uploaded them on the listing, and then I was able to log in and I was able to start writing the listing description. Now, my tips that I want to share is that when it comes to writing the description, keep it short and simple. One of the hosts that I read online, they mentioned that you should specifically call out any house rules or anything that you want the guests to know in a bullet point fashion. And I'll show you an example of that in a second, but I knew that I didn't want my guests cooking. So I specifically called that out as this was a no cooking kitchen, but there were plenty of restaurants nearby. And when guests checked in, I would provide them with a list of restaurants that were nearby. And guess what? The guests were okay with it. Nobody complained because I specifically called it out and they saw it before booking. Now let's talk about actually hosting on Airbnb, because hosting was pretty straightforward. A booking request comes in, you accept it, you communicate back and forth with the guests, the check-in instructions. Sometimes I would check them in and I would meet them. Other times it was impossible for me to meet them, whether I was working or I was out of town. So what I would do is I would put their name on the front desk's list as one of my visitors, and then the front desk would have them go up, and I had a keypad on the front door, so they would enter in the keypad, and then inside, right on the table, I would leave the master key to the condo. Now, during hosting, I really didn't encounter any challenges besides maybe a guest staying a little bit too late past checkout. All my guests were great, and they mentioned what an awesome location it was, and they were really happy with the place overall. The challenge for me though is that at one point I started to get host fatigue. And host fatigue is when you start getting exhausted of hosting people. Because at first you're so excited, you have so much energy, you are excited to accept your first or your second guest and have them over. But after the sixth or the seventh guest and you change over, you start to get exhausted. It's a lot to maintain everything by yourself. My biggest thing was cleanliness. So if there was anything that I wanted to be known for in my reviews, I wanted people to know how clean my place was. And I took cleaning very seriously. I would disinfect everything between every single guest stay. It was a ton of work, and I was working on Lincoln Road at the time, full time, so I would have to run back and forth between lunch breaks. I would clock out, run back home, check out the guest, clean everything, do the linens, and then check them in almost within an hour, because a lot of the time I didn't want the front desk to meet the guest. I wanted to keep that on the down low for as long as I could. I also wanted to make as much money as I can, so I didn't hire a professional cleaner to clean in between guests. I would do everything myself. Now, once I was up and running, things were going great. I was getting 5-star reviews, I was getting booked, and for a while, I could make my entire month's rent, like not just my roommate's portion, like both of our portions, our entire month's rent in something like 10 to 14 days, depending on how much I was charging. People were booking a couple months in advance, so I would adjust the pricing based on what events I knew were happening. When I was slow, I would knock prices down like $25 to $50, and I would get some bookings that way. But I was pretty lucky because there were a ton of events happening while I was hosting. There was Food and Wine Festival, Art Basel. I was booked almost every weekend solid. It seemed like the perfect way to make some extra money until the HOA found out. So the discovery by my landlord was one day I check my email and I have a message from my landlord with a forwarded message from the HOA. Basically what happened is they sent the board meetings, and then after the board meeting, they sent a warning and a reminder that any guests that were staying overnight had to be screened by the association. So I had to call and talk to my landlord and mention my new friends that were staying with me and that my friends wouldn't be staying with me anymore. And I still don't know how I didn't get evicted, because also at the same time, my lease was up for renewal, and he actually let me stay without increasing me. So I think he was just happy that he got his check in full every month. But times have changed, and that is like no longer the case. Like if a landlord finds you doing Airbnb in their property, you will be evicted within 3 days. As soon as I got caught, I knew that I couldn't do it again. I was already pushing it as it is with having people check in at the front desk. And I knew that the condo had to be onto me with all these random people coming and going and moving in with their luggage in and out of the lobby. So looking back on it, I really can't believe how much I pushed this poor little condo association with my little Airbnb business for as long as I did, but I definitely learned my lesson. What I learned from this experience is that if you are going to do Airbnb, it is much, much easier to do it in a legal way than to try and get away with it. You might be able to get away with it for a little bit. In my case, it was a solid 6 months before somebody noticed and said something. But here's the thing, your guests are going to slip up. They're going to talk to somebody in the condo building. People notice suitcases being dragged in and out of the elevator. A guest will probably leave your front door open and your neighbor's gonna see it, and then they're gonna call downstairs to security. These are all things that can and will and did happen that you will probably have no control over. Now that things have changed, more condos actually spell out Airbnb and home sharing in the condo rules. A lot of the condo buildings now post signs at the front desk that say that Airbnb is not allowed, and there are more regulations since 2015. So if you're considering renting your property on Airbnb, check your local regulations. The Airbnb website has some excellent resources for you to do your own research. Now, what's really exciting is that we are actually seeing condo buildings being built specifically for home sharing. In South Florida, 70% of our condo buildings are older than 40 years old. And back then, the condos weren't designed for home sharing because there was no Airbnb. There was no coming and going of people booking a place to stay on an app or what have you. Think of all the wear and tear on these smaller condo buildings from 40, 50 years ago. You have your housekeeping people coming in and out every single day. You have deliveries, Uber Eats deliveries. You have guests checking in, checking out every single day. It puts a lot of wear and tear on the building, and the buildings weren't designed for this. They weren't designed to store luggage, to receive packages, to have this space for people to gather in the lobbies. But nowadays, almost all the new construction condos in Miami are being designed for people coming and going, and they're designed for home sharing. So personally, if I was to get into my next Airbnb property, I would buy something. The arbitrage leasing model is just not for me, and it doesn't work in Miami. It does work for some people, and that is great. I am not saying there's anything wrong with it, because there is no wrong way to make an income. I am just saying that particularly for me, it didn't work in Miami. I really want a deal that I could get into and I could build equity and have tax advantages. When you arbitrage something and you're on a lease, there are gonna be less exit strategies than if you were to own something. I don't know if I would particularly buy an Airbnb property here in Miami. It's just something that's a lot of work, and I'm primarily focused on running my real estate business. And if I was to have to do an Airbnb business, I just feel like it would be a lot. So what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking outside my market, and I'm working with an agent that specializes in short-term rental properties. You should follow my buddy Austin. Austin is based in Dallas, Texas. He has an awesome Airbnb style business. He works primarily with single family homes. He does crazy stuff with lands and rehabs and flips. You should definitely check him out, but that's what I recommend. I recommend partnering with an agent who can give you some guidance on the market. And by the way, I have Compass agents all across the country, and I would love to refer you out if you were looking to do something with Airbnb. So that's the story about how I got caught by my landlord for Airbnb-ing my apartment for 6 months. If you got any value out of this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a like, and also check out my other videos right here on the channel. I talk about doing Airbnb legally if you're interested in it. And if you're looking to invest in real estate, it doesn't just have to be in Miami. You can schedule a free discovery call with me. The link is in the show description below. And I'd be happy to refer you out to any of my agent partners across the country. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.